For almost all of human history, they didn't do it alone. There were no bedroom doors, no private rooms, no walls thick enough to muffle sound. A hunter-gatherer band slept together, 20 or 30 people in a single shelter or around a single fire, and the idea that two of them might walk off to a separate place for privacy did not exist for most of our species. Sex happened in the company of other people, sometimes within sight, almost always within hearing. Children grew up watching the act that made them, the way they watched everything else the adults around them did. It was not hidden. There was nowhere to hide it. This is one of the strangest facts about human history, and almost nobody tells it. The privacy you associate with sex, the locked door, the quiet, the assumption that what happens between two people is sealed off from everyone else, is a recent invention. It has existed for, at most, the last few thousand years, and even then only for the wealthy. For the 200,000 years before that, sex was simply something the band knew about, in the same casual way it knew who had caught a fish that day. To understand the world we lost, you have to first let go of what you think ancient sex looked like. Most modern people, when they imagine prehistoric humans, picture something brutal, a man taking, a woman submitting, a transactional, almost animal exchange between two people whose interior lives didn't really count. This image is wrong. Almost everything in it is wrong. When anthropologists study hunter-gatherer societies that have survived into the modern era, the Mehinaku of the Amazon, the Trobriand Islanders of the South Pacific, the Mosuo of southwestern China, they find something modern people are not prepared for: long courtship, mutual selection, extensive non-coital intimacy, songs, gifts, jokes, private signals, female sexual agency. Women in many of these cultures choose their partners openly, end relationships when they want to, and are not punished for either. The picture of ancient sex as one-sided and crude is mostly a Victorian fantasy, projected backward onto people whose lives the Victorians never bothered to study. Sex in the deep past appears to have been gentler, more egalitarian, and more woven into ordinary life than almost anything Western history has trained modern people to imagine. It was also not organized around the systems modern people assume. For most of human history, there was no single model. Cultures varied. Some practiced lifelong pair bonding, many did not. Some had serial monogamy, a series of significant partnerships, one after another, sometimes lasting years, sometimes decades. Some had what anthropologists call partible paternity, in which a woman could be openly sexual with several men during pregnancy, all of whom became recognized fathers of the child. Some had institutionalized lover relationships that existed alongside marriage, with the knowledge and acceptance of the spouse. Some, like the Mosuo, who still practiced this, had walking marriages in which men visited their partners at night and returned to their own family households in the morning, never living together at all. There was no original form of human sexual life. There were dozens of forms, none of them universal, none of them obviously better than any other, and most of them more flexible than the model most modern people live inside. What modern people think of as traditional, one man, one woman, for life, behind a closed door, in a particular position, with sex framed as something serious and private and slightly shameful, is not traditional at all. It is one cultural arrangement out of many, and a comparatively recent one. Even the most basic assumptions about how sex was performed turn out to be modern. The so-called missionary position, long assumed to be the default, got its name from the European missionaries who insisted on it. They were appalled to discover that the people they were trying to convert had no preferred position, no concept that one was holier than another, and often laughed at the idea that it mattered. The name stuck. The assumption that one position was the human baseline is roughly 1,500 years old. Before that, there is no evidence any culture cared. The same is true of secrecy, modesty, and shame. These are not human universals. They are the product of a specific cultural shift that began about 10,000 years ago, when humans started farming. The same shift that produced inheritance, property, and the obsession with paternity also produced the architecture of sexual repression, marriage as contract, female chastity as social currency, sex as something that had to be regulated, monitored, hidden, confessed. The privacy we now experience as natural began as control. It was not invented to protect anyone. It was invented to make sure the people inside a marriage knew exactly what the people inside that marriage were doing, and were not doing it with anyone else. We inherited that framework. We still live inside it, even after sexual freedom returned to most of the modern world. And here is the part that should land. Modern people, despite living in the most sexually permissive era in centuries, are by almost every measurable indicator the loneliest version of this our species has produced. Surveys in industrialized countries consistently show that adults today have fewer sexual partners than their parents did at the same age. Sexual frequency has fallen for 2 decades running. The share of young adults reporting no sexual activity in the past year has reached the highest levels ever recorded. People marry later, partner less, and report lower satisfaction with the partnerships they do have. The locked door turned out to be lonelier than the open fire. The privacy modern people fought for, won, and now take for granted has come with a quiet cost that the cultures we replaced never had to pay. Hunter-gatherer sex was watched. It was known. It was part of the daily fabric of a group of people who never spent a single hour alone. Modern sex is hidden, mediated through screens, often coordinated by algorithms, performed between people who barely know each other and may never see each other again. The system is freer. It is also colder. The ancient world did not have our freedom. It had something else we have lost. Sex was not a secret. It was not a transaction. It was not a private failure or a private achievement. It was simply something humans did, where other humans could see it, with their full knowledge that it was happening. We do not get to have that anymore. We have curtains, and locks, and screens, and silence, and we are not, on the whole, any happier than the people who had none of those things.